People think the betrayal is the sharpest cut. They're wrong. The real pain is finding out you were scheduled for removal from your own life by your husband and the daughter-in-law you embraced. I learned it all 1 week before we signed the divorce papers. So I smiled and played the fool. They thought I was finished. They had no idea the house, the assets, and their very freedom were already mine. I'm Zara Barnes, at 46. I believed my life was settled, baked into the very foundations of this house in Brookridge. My role was clear. I was the keeper of the home, the coordinator of schedules, the one who remembered birthdays and anniversaries. I worked part-time at the Brightline Community Project, organizing fundraisers and outreach events, a job that gave me satisfaction but never defined me. My real job, I thought, was this family. My marriage to Grant was in its 20th year. The fire had long since cooled, leaving a bed of embers I mistook for stable, enduring warmth. It was a companionship, I told myself. Safe, predictable. The late afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, highlighting the absolute stillness of the room. This kitchen was my center. The counters were quartz, clean and cool. But the island was a heavy block of butcher's wood, scarred with 20 years of life. On the windowsill sat my mother's porcelain milk pitcher, filled with wooden spoons. Her handwriting was still visible on the tabs of the recipe box next to the stove. I was a nester, a keeper. This house wasn't just a structure. It was the container for my entire adult life, bought and paid for with the inheritance my mother left me. The silence was broken by the sharp trill of my phone on the island. I glanced at the screen. Harper Rhodes. My stomach tightened instantly. Harper was Sienna's older sister, and Sienna was my daughter-in-law, my son Logan's wife. Harper was the quiet one, the shadow. We were polite at family gatherings, but never warm. Since Sienna had married Logan 2 years ago, Harper had become even more remote, as if proximity to our family made her physically uncomfortable. I swiped to answer. Harper, is everything all right? Her voice was thin, watery, and terrified. Zara, I need to see you. Can I come over, right now? Of course. But what's wrong? Is Sienna okay? Is Logan? No, it's not them. Not exactly. A choked sound, like a sob being swallowed. Please, just don't tell anyone I'm coming, especially not Sienna. Please. The dread solidified, turning from a vague unease into a cold, heavy stone in my gut. I won't. I'm home. The door's open. I ended the call and stood motionless. The clock above the oven ticked, each second a hammer blow against the quiet. She lived 20 minutes away. I had 20 minutes to imagine every possible disaster, but none of them came close to the truth. When the bell rang, I almost jumped out of my skin. I opened the front door to find Harper looking worse than she sounded. She was pale, her skin slick with a cold sweat under the porch light. Her eyes were wide and darted past me, checking the driveway, the street. She clutched her large leather tote bag to her chest like a shield. "He's not here, Grant," she whispered. "No, he's working late. Come in." I led her back to the kitchen, the only room that felt safe enough to contain what was coming. I offered coffee, water. She just shook her head, sinking into one of the heavy wooden chairs at the island. She didn't take off her coat. She placed the bag on her lap, hands gripping the strap. "Harper, you're scaring me." "I should be scared," she said, her voice barely audible. I saw something. I shouldn't have been there. I followed her. I know that's crazy, but I had this feeling." "Followed who?" I asked, though the stone in my gut knew. "Sienna." She finally looked at me, her eyes brimming with a mixture of pity and terror. "And Grant." The names hung in the air, disconnected. Grant, Sienna, my husband, my son's wife. It made no sense. "What do you mean? You saw them." "Together. Zara, at a motel. The King's Rest. Off the highway. I saw his car. I saw her go into the room. I waited. I saw them leave together hours later." The room tilted. The air became thick. Unbreathable. I gripped the edge of the quartz counter to steady myself. When, 1 week ago, last Tuesday, 1 week ago, Grant had been closing a deal with a new client. Sienna had supposedly been at a spa day with friends. The coordinated lie, the sheer, bald-faced audacity of it. I didn't want to believe it, Harper continued, the words spilling out in a desperate rush now. I thought, maybe it's a meeting, but it was the way they looked, the way he touched her back. She looked down at her lap. So I did something terrible. I put a recorder in her car, just a small one. I had to know. I thought maybe she was in trouble. She fumbled with the clasp on her bag, pulling out her phone and a small digital recorder. She didn't play the recording. She just told me. It was worse than I thought. She's not in trouble. She's in charge. Harper's voice broke. She was bragging, to him, about this house. My gaze snapped up. This house. She said you were getting old and easy to manage, that you'd be so grateful for a fresh start, you'd sign anything. Harper was crying openly now, tears cutting clean tracks through her foundation. And she said Grant was already having the divorce papers drawn up, that they were planning to sign next week, and that after you were gone, this house would be hers. She said, my father-in-law will handle it. She was laughing. Zara, both of them, they were laughing. Betrayal. I thought I knew the word. I didn't. This was an annihilation. 20 years of marriage, my only son, the woman I had welcomed into this kitchen, the one who had called me Mom, a name I had gently corrected, now felt like a curse. They weren't just having an affair. They were conducting a coup. They were planning to evict me from my own life, using my son as a smokescreen and my home, my mother's home, as their trophy. A strange calm descended, pushing past the shock. The tears I expected didn't come. Instead, a cold, clear anger settled over me. It was ice, not fire. It was a clarity so sharp it hurt. I took a deep breath, my voice surprisingly steady. Does Sienna know you know? Harper shook her head violently. God, no, she'd disown me. Or worse, she's not who you think. Zara, she's not who Logan thinks. Does she know you're here? No, I told her I was going to the city for a trunk show. Good, I nodded, the gears in my mind turning, clicking into place. Go home. Harper, delete any messages between us about this. If she asks, you were at the trunk show. You saw nothing. You know nothing. Can you do that? She looked confused, as if she expected me to fall apart. But, Zara, what are you going to do? I'm going to do exactly what they expect me to do, I said, the ice in my veins solidifying into steel. They thought I was old. They thought I was a fool. They thought I was a simple, sentimental housewife who didn't understand the law, who hadn't read every line of the Callahan Heritage Trust my mother had established before I ever met Grant Calloway. Harper, thank you for telling me, I said, walking her to the door. Now go. Be safe. After she left, I stood in the kitchen as the last of the light faded, plunging the room into shadow. They thought I was easy to manage. They thought I was finished. They had no idea. I will pretend I know nothing, and I will let them walk right into the trap they built for me. After Harper left, the silence in my kitchen was different. It was no longer peaceful. It was a vacuum. And into that vacuum, every memory from the past 2 weeks, which I had previously dismissed, rushed in with horrifying clarity. Grant's behavior, the late nights, chalked up to a difficult merger at his firm, the sudden, obsessive care he took with his phone, which now lived face down on the nightstand, a silent black mirror. I had caught the scent of perfume on his shirt 3 nights ago. A cloyingly sweet, floral scent. It wasn't mine. I had told myself it was just a colleague's, transferred in a platonic hug. Now I knew better. It was Sienna's signature scent. He had started taking calls in the garage, pacing back and forth by the workbench, his voice a low, urgent murmur I couldn't quite decipher. I had assumed it was work stress. It was conspiracy. Then, Sienna. Her concern for me at our Sunday dinners. It all replayed in my head. But now with Harper's words as the soundtrack. Zara, you and Grant should really think about living more simply, she had said just last weekend, her hand on Logan's arm, her expression one of perfect, concerned innocence. This house is just so much work for one person. One person, not two. She knew, a few weeks before that, she had brought over a brochure. I found the most adorable Riverview apartment complex. Zara, concierge service, a pool. It would be so fun for you, like a fresh start. You deserve to be pampered. At the time, I had laughed it off, touched by her misguided thoughtfulness. Sienna, darling, I'm not ready for a retirement home just yet, she had smiled, a tight, polished smile. Of course not. It's just so much space. They were doing exactly what Harper said. They were painting the picture, slowly and carefully, of the aging wife, tired of her big empty nest, grateful to be moved into a smaller, easier life. They weren't just planning to take the house. They were building a narrative where I gave it to them willingly. They were managing me. The ice in my veins spread. I left the kitchen and walked down the hall to the small study Grant rarely used. Tucked behind a framed print of the Brook Ridge coastline was a wall safe. My mother had insisted on it. I spun the combination, the clicks echoing in the quiet room. Inside, beneath my old passports and some jewelry, was a thick, leather-bound portfolio. Callahan Heritage Trust. My mother's maiden name. I hadn't looked at this in detail since my wedding. When I married Grant, my mother, deeply skeptical of him even then, had structured her will meticulously. The inheritance she left me, the money that had bought this house and the cabin at Silverwell Lake, was funneled through this trust. I carried the portfolio back to the kitchen island, switched on the light, and opened it. My mother's lawyer had been thorough. I bypassed the financial statements and went straight to the trust's covenants. The language was archaic, dense, and beautiful, and there it was. Paragraph 4, Section B. Assets purchased with funds originating from the Callahan Heritage Trust, including the primary residence, shall not be conveyed, transferred, or assigned to any individual not of direct blood lineage to the beneficiary. I was the beneficiary. Logan was my direct bloodline. Grant was not. Sienna was not. But there was more, a codicil, added just before my mother's death, that I had only vaguely registered at the time. Paragraph 7. In the event of a marital dissolution, should said dissolution be the result of proven infidelity on the part of the beneficiary's spouse, said spouse shall forfeit any and all claims, present and future, to any property, asset, or holding derived from or maintained by the trust. My breath caught. It was a knife. A precise, perfectly crafted blade from 2 decades in the past, forged by a mother who saw the man her daughter could not. Grant had signed these papers. I remembered the day. We were closing on this house. The lawyers had presented a stack of documents an inch thick. Grant, impatient and eager to get to a celebratory lunch, had scrawled his signature wherever the lawyer pointed. He never read a word. He just assumed my inheritance was our inheritance. Sienna, with her talk of, "My father-in-law will handle it," was operating on that same fatal assumption. My path was clear. I was not going to use Grant's lawyer, a friend from his golf club. I was going to find a shark. The next morning, I withdrew $5,000 in cash from my personal savings account, the one Grant didn't know about. I drove downtown, not to the polished glass towers where Grant's firm operated, but to an older, restored brick building on the other side of the river. The plaque on the door was discreet: Alyssa Mercer Associates, Family Law. I had found her online at 2 a.m, searching for Brook Ridge's most ruthless divorce lawyer. Her reviews were a terrifying, beautiful mix of "she saved my life" and "she will burn the other side to the ground." Her office was not warm. It was furnished in steel, glass, and shades of gray. No family photos, no soft edges. Alyssa Mercer herself was in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She wore a perfectly tailored gray suit. She listened without interruption. I laid it all out, Grant. Sienna, the motel, the conversation Harper had recorded, their plan to have me sign away my home, and finally, the leather-bound trust document, which I placed on her glass desk. I spoke without emotion, my voice as cold and clear as I could make it. When I finished, she was silent for a full minute, her fingers steepled. She looked at me, then at the trust, then back at me. "Mrs. Barnes," she said, and her voice was as sharp as her suit, "they aren't just trying to divorce you. They're attempting to commit felony-level fraud." She picked up the trust. "This," she said, tapping the leather, "is ironclad. The adultery clause is a bonus. But this bloodline covenant, it's a fortress. The house is not marital property. It never was. He has zero claim. His signature on the closing documents, where he would have acknowledged the trust's involvement, makes him complicit in his own ignorance." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now," Alyssa said, a faint, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "You do nothing. You play the part they've cast you in, the old and easy-to-manage wife. Grant's lawyer is going to present you with the most insulting, one-sided divorce agreement imaginable. Your part is simple. You are going to sign it. Sign it, sign away my house. Yes, you will sign their fraudulent document. You will let them believe they have won. You will let them file it with the court, and then," she leaned forward, "we will file our response. We will present the trust, the adultery evidence, and a motion to void their entire filing on the basis of bad faith and fraud. We will not only secure your house, we will use their own arrogance to strip Grant of any claim to the lake cabin and most of the shared investments tied to trust-funded maintenance. They are handing us the rope. You just have to let them." She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Go home. Mrs. Barnes, be sad, be confused, be managed. Let them dig their own graves. I'll have the shovel waiting." I walked out of that office into the bright afternoon sun, the $5,000 in cash still in an envelope. When I had tried to pay for the consultation, she had held up a hand. "Consider this a professional courtesy," she'd said. "I detest lazy predators. My fee will come from the settlement. And believe me, he's going to pay it." I drove home, got out of my car, and looked at my house, my mother's house, Sienna's trophy, Grant's bargaining chip. They thought I was a placeholder. They were about to find out I was the foundation. Sunday arrived, heavy with a dread I had to disguise as normalcy. This was our standing tradition Sunday dinner. It had been my rule, a way to keep the family tethered. Now it felt like a stage set for my own execution. Logan and Sienna arrived at 5, right on time. Logan, my son, all earnestness and easy smiles, kissed my cheek, completely oblivious. "Smells amazing, Mom." Sienna glided in behind him. She was wearing a new dress, a silk sheath in a deep burgundy that probably cost more than my monthly salary at Brightline. It clung to her, and then, the scent. It hit me before she even reached me. That same cloyingly sweet, floral perfume I'd smelled on Grant's shirt. She had worn it to my house. The audacity of it was a physical blow. She hugged me, a dry, papery embrace. "Zara, you look tired. Are you taking care of yourself?" "Just busy, Sienna. You know how it is." I forced a smile and turned toward the kitchen. "Grant's running late. A last-minute contract issue with Northline Capital Group." I delivered the lie I'd been fed that morning, a lie I now knew was a cover for God knows what. "Oh, poor Grant. He works too hard," Sienna said, her voice dripping with a sympathy that made my skin crawl. She followed me to the island, her eyes already scanning the room, not as a guest, but as an inspector. "Can I help with anything?" Logan asked, already grabbing a beer from the fridge. "No, honey, just relax. We'll eat as soon as your father gets here." Sienna perched on a stool, crossing her long legs. "So, Zara, she began, her tone light. Have you given any more thought to your plans after, well, you know, Logan looked up sharply. Sienna, not at the dinner table. What, she said, feigning innocence. I'm just concerned. It's a big change. Honestly, Zara, I think it could be exciting for you. A fresh start. Think about it. A woman of your age, single in the city. You could get a chic little place downtown. Go to the theater. A woman of my age, the coded insult, wrapped in a bow of concern. This was the narrative. I was the old wife being put out to pasture. I felt the sting. But I leaned into it, just as Alyssa had advised. I sighed. A performance of weariness. You know, Sienna, I've been thinking the same thing. Both she and Logan looked surprised. This house, I said, gesturing vaguely at the kitchen, my mother's kitchen. It's so much. The upkeep, the memories. Maybe it's time to let it go. Let someone who will really use it, really live in it, take over. I was looking at Logan, but I saw Sienna's reaction from the corner of my eye, a stillness, a sharpening. Her eyes, just for a fraction of a second, lit up with a predatory gleam. She had taken the bait. Before she could respond, the front door opened and Grant walked in, loosening his tie. Sorry I'm late. Doyle is a tyrant. He mentioned his lawyer's name casually, another piece of the performance. He came over and gave me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. It felt like a cold coin pressed against my skin. He avoided my eyes. Smells good. Zara? Dinner's ready, I said, turning to the oven. As I did, I watched him. He turned to greet Logan, and his gaze slid past my son to Sienna. It was a look that lasted no more than a second, but it was everything. It was not a father-in-law looking at his daughter-in-law. It was possessive, familiar, and charged with a shared secret. It was a look of complicity. I logged it, filed it away with the perfume and the late nights. We sat down at the heavy wooden table, the one I had picked out 20 years ago. The meal was a grotesque parody of family life. Grant and Logan talked about a new development project. I pushed roast chicken around my plate. Sienna, however, was in her element. While Logan was explaining some zoning ordinance, Sienna leaned toward Grant, feigning interest in what he was saying but lowering her voice. We'll have to tear down that whole pantry wall, she murmured, thinking she was inaudible. It opens up the entire line of sight to the garden. Grant nodded, not missing a beat in his conversation with Logan. And the master bedroom, he whispered back a moment later. Needs to be painted. That green is depressing. My mother had picked that green. They were redesigning my bedroom, my kitchen, while sitting at my table, eating my food, in front of my son. They had already moved in. The pain was so sharp, so sudden, that I almost dropped my fork. I felt the ice in my veins crack. I wanted to stand up and scream, to take the platter of food and sweep it onto the floor, to point at them and expose them for the vipers they were. But I looked at Logan. He was laughing at something Grant said, completely unaware that his life was a lie. He was happy. He was in love with the woman who was sleeping with his father, my son, my only child, was the collateral damage in their war. The pity I felt for him was suffocating, but I couldn't tell him, not yet. Telling him now, without the full weight of the legal proof, would just be an allegation. His mother's word against his wife's, he would be torn, and he might, in his blindness, choose her. I had to wait. I had to be the foundation. I took a shaky breath and refroze the ice. Zara. You okay? Logan asked, noticing my silence. I manufactured a small, sad smile. Yes, honey. Just thinking. I turned to Sienna, playing my next card. You were right. Sienna, about a new place. I've actually been holding on to a small apartment near the river from before I was married. It's tiny, but it's mine. This was technically true. I did co-own a small unit with my cousin, but it has been leased to the same reliable tenant for over a decade. But they didn't need to know that. Sienna seized on it immediately. See, Logan, see? She reached across the table and put her hand on his, a gesture of wifely support. Your mom is already prepared. She's ready for this change. She's strong. It's a good thing. Honey, it means everyone can move forward. She was brilliant. I had to give her that. She was using my own feigned acceptance to neutralize my son, to paint me as a willing participant in my own demise. She was making him an accessory. Logan looked at me, his eyes full of a relief that broke my heart. Is that true? Mom? Are you really okay with all this? I looked at my husband, the stranger at the head of the table. I looked at my daughter-in-law, the thief sitting beside him, and I looked at my son, the fool between them. I'm learning to be, I said. That night, after the house was finally quiet, after the plates were washed and the kitchen was mine again, I went to my study. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and sent a text to the only person on my side. Alyssa, it's Zara. They're all in. They think I'm handing over the house. They're already picking out paint. I'll sign whatever they give me. I was back in Alyssa Mercer's steel and glass office 2 days later, the Callahan Heritage Trust portfolio open on the desk between us. The mood wasn't emotional. It was surgical. Let's inventory the battlefield, Mrs. Barnes, Alyssa said, pulling a yellow legal pad toward her. Assets, won the primary residence in Brookridge. Bought with my inheritance, I stated. Stab-proof, 2. The vacation cabin at Silverwell Lake. Also bought with trust money, I said. My mother loved that place. Grant hasn't been up there in 5 years. Excellent, she made a sharp note. The trust covenants apply to both. They are not marital property. They are, and always have been, your property, the adultery clause. She tapped the trust document. Is the final nail. It extinguishes any remote claim he might try to invent, like marital funds being used for upkeep, which is the angle they usually try. With proven infidelity, he gets nothing. 0. 3, she continued. The joint investment account? My stomach tightened. That's in Grant's name. He manages it. And he's been managing it for 20 years. This is where it gets sticky, but not impossible. We'll need to prove he's been siphoning funds, which brings us to the next point proof. Harper's testimony. The recording. Is a good start, Alyssa cut in, holding up a hand. But she said with a jilted sister-in-law, is messy. What I need is a clean, undeniable kill. Hotel receipts, credit card statements in both their names, timestamps. The affair happened at the King's Rest Motel. You said, that's a start. We need to tie Grant to that location on that date. Harper is terrified, I said. Sienna is her sister. She's given me the what, but I don't know if she'll give me the how. Then you need to convince her. We need photos. We need text messages. We need a digital footprint. Zara, we need to prove he was with her. I took a breath, the air in the air-conditioned office feeling thin. I have something else, something Harper told me. It's about the timing. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. This affair, the motel, it happened 1 week before Grant scheduled the first meeting with his lawyer to draw up the papers. The meeting I'm supposed to go to next week. Alyssa, who I had assumed was incapable of visible emotion, actually smiled. It was a cold, bright, terrifying expression. Oh, that is beautiful. Just beautiful. Why? Because, Zara, it vaporizes his entire legal position. He can't claim irreconcilable differences. He can't claim the marriage was simply broken. We can now prove, unequivocally, that the divorce itself is a mechanism to facilitate the adultery. He isn't divorcing you and sleeping with her. He's divorcing you to sleep with her and, more importantly, to install her in your home. It's premeditated. It's collusion. She leaned back, the smile fading, replaced by that sharp, surgical focus. So here's the plan. It has not changed. It is just better. You will go to that meeting at Kane, Doyle, and Petrov, Grant's lawyers. Correct. You will go, and you will wear the perfect costume. I want you to be the wife he sees in his head, the one who is confused, a little sad, overwhelmed by the legal forms, but ultimately compliant. No power suits, no sharp questions. You are a woman of your age. Remember, you are easy to manage. I want you to wear a beige cardigan, if you own one. I think I do, I said, a small, bitter laugh escaping me. Wear it. You will sit at that table. You will listen to Mr. Doyle's condescending explanation of why this deeply unfair settlement is in your best interest, and you will sign the papers he gives you. You will sign away your house, your cabin, and your dignity. You will let Grant and Sienna watch you do it. You will let them feel that complete, satisfying victory. And then you will walk out of that building. You will call me, and I will file our counter-motion within the hour. We will file the trust documents, the proof of adultery, and a petition to have their entire agreement thrown out on the grounds of procurement by fraud. While they are out having a celebratory dinner, a process server will be delivering my filing to Mr. Doyle's office, and a second one will be delivering a notice of a restraining order to Grant, barring him from your property. My property, I repeated, the words tasting right for the first time. Yes, now go home, and get me that proof. I agreed. I nodded. I left her office, but as I drove back to Brookridge, something inside me had shifted. This was no longer a defensive operation. Alyssa had given me the legal framework, but Harper's words, Sienna's words, getting old and easy to manage, were the emotional fuel. This wasn't just about keeping my house anymore. It was about them. It was about the two people who had sat at my table, laughing at me, planning my eviction. They hadn't just tried to take my home, they had tried to make me homeless. A new, colder layer of the plan began to form in my mind. A layer I wouldn't share with Alyssa. It wasn't enough to win. They had to lose. Utterly. I didn't just want my house back. I wanted them to know the precise, stomach-dropping terror of having nowhere to go. That evening, I began. I went to the master closet and pulled out one of Grant's expensive, empty suitcases. I started packing his things. I folded his suits, his shirts, his golf polos. I moved them, one by one, out of the life we had shared and into the cold, concrete garage. If Logan or Grant called, I had my story ready. I'm just getting a head start on packing. It's too painful to see his things in the closet. I was the sad, compliant wife. I was managing my grief. But as I packed, I was really doing inventory. I was separating my life from his. And I was checking his pockets. I was controlling what left my house and what evidence stayed. When the closet was empty, I went to my study. I had one more piece of homework. I had an old friend from my college days who was now a regional manager at the bank Grant used. I hadn't spoken to her in 6 months, but she owed me a favor from when I'd helped her son get an internship at Brightline. I dialed her number. "Hey, Sarah, it's Zara Barnes. I know this is an odd request, and it has to be completely off the record. I'm worried Grant is having some financial trouble. He's been moving large sums of money around, and I'm scared. Could you just take a look at our joint account, just so I know we're okay?" I let the feigned panic tremble in my voice. I was the worried wife, the one kept in the dark. "Zara, I really shouldn't," she began. "Please, Sarah, he's not himself. I'm just looking for a simple printout of the last few weeks' activity. I'm scared he's gambling again." I added the lie. A little spice, a heavy sigh on the other end. "Let me see what I can do. No promises. And this conversation never happened. Thank you. Sarah, you're a lifesaver." I hung up. I had the legal plan. I had the emotional motivation. And now, I was hunting for the financial kill. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the rats to walk into it. The day of the signing arrived on a cold, bright Tuesday. I dressed for the part just as Alyssa had instructed. I found a faded, oatmeal-colored cardigan at the back of my closet, one I usually wore for gardening. I paired it with gray slacks and flat shoes. I wore no jewelry except my wedding band, a calculated touch of pathos. I pulled my hair back into a simple, severe bun, applied no makeup, and looked in the mirror. I was the very picture of a woman erased. I was getting old and easy to manage. The offices of Kane, Doyle, and Petrov LLP were on the top floor of the tallest glass building in downtown Brookridge. The reception area was a vast expanse of marble, dark mahogany, and silent, expensive art. It was designed to make you feel small. I gave my name and was told to wait. I wasn't kept waiting long. A paralegal with a fixed, insincere smile led me to a conference room. The room was dominated by a gleaming, football field-sized table of the same dark wood, surrounded by at least 20 high-backed leather chairs. The air was cold. They were all there already, arranged on one side of the table as if for a portrait of a new, smug dynasty. Grant sat in the middle, staring at a yellow legal pad, his shoulders tense and expressionless. Beside him was his lawyer, Mr. Doyle, a man who looked like he had been assembled from a catalog of expensive predatory parts. He was all pinstripes, cufflinks, and a sharp reptilian gaze, and next to Grant, on his other side, were Logan and Sienna. My son looked miserable, his eyes red-rimmed, his gaze fixed on the table, but Sienna was electric. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like the new CEO, not a supporting guest. She was holding Logan's hand, but her entire body, her entire focus, was angled toward Grant. They were here to support Dad. The lie was so blatant, so grotesque, it was almost impressive. I walked in, and all conversation stopped. "Zara, thank you for coming." "Mr. Doyle said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone that made my skin crawl. He gestured to the single chair opposite them, a deliberate, isolating placement. I felt like a defendant. I sat down, placing my worn handbag in my lap. "Grant, Mr. Doyle, Logan, Sienna." I nodded to each of them, my voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Well," Doyle said, opening a thick blue-bound folder. "This is always a difficult day. We're all here to make this transition as smooth and painless as possible. Grant has been exceptionally clear that his priority is your well-being, Zara, and to ensure a fair and equitable division of assets." He slid the document across the polished surface. It was at least an inch thick. "I've taken the liberty of marking the signature pages to expedite the process." I did not reach for it. I just looked at him. "Let's walk through the key points," he said, tapping the cover. "Grant, in recognition of his ongoing business needs and his contributions to the marriage, will retain the primary residence in Brookridge." I felt Logan flinch beside Sienna. "He will also retain the cabin at Silverwell Lake," Doyle continued, his voice unchanged. "Again, for business and client entertainment, the joint investment portfolio will remain under Grant's management, as he has the expertise to." "What about Mom?" Logan's voice was rough. He cut his father's lawyer off. Grant shot him a warning look. "Logan, please, Mr. Doyle is explaining." "No. What does she get?" Logan pressed, pulling his hand free from Sienna's. Doyle sighed, a small performance of patience. "As I was saying, Zara will receive the apartment on River Street, the one I had mentioned, the one I didn't actually have access to, and Grant has graciously agreed to a supplemental support payment of $5,000 a month for a period of 24 months, 2 years. After 20 years of marriage, it was a joke. "The house," I said, my voice barely audible. I let it tremble. "The house was my mother's, from her inheritance." This was the moment. The air crackled. Grant looked down. Sienna's jaw tensed. Mr. Doyle leaned forward, clasping his hands. His expression was one of deep, professional sympathy. "Yes, Zara, this is the difficult part. I'm afraid my team's research uncovered a significant legal complication regarding the provenance of that inheritance. The way the trust was structured and then commingled with marital funds over the last 2 decades, frankly, it's a legal nightmare. It's exposed to significant tax liabilities and potential creditor claims from Grant's business. The cleanest, Safest way to protect the asset, he smiled gently, is to have it solely under Grant's name. He's taking on the risk. You see, for both of you, it was the most beautiful, intricate lie I had ever heard. He was painting Grant as a hero, a martyr, taking on a legal nightmare that was, in fact, my ironclad fortress. He was telling me my own trust, the one he had clearly never seen, was a danger to me. I watched Sienna. She was looking at the far wall, a faint, tiny smile at the corners of her mouth. She was already picturing the new paint, the pantry wall torn down. I looked at Logan. He was frowning, confused. That doesn't sound right. Mom's family lawyer always said. Logan, honey. Sienna's voice was soft, but it sliced through the air. This is why we have Mr. Doyle. These things are complicated. Your mom understands. We're just here to support your parents in their decision. She put her hand back on Logan's arm, a clear message to be quiet. All eyes turned to me. This was my cue. I looked down at my lap. I let a single tear trace a path down my cheek. I had practiced it. I let the silence stretch, filling it with my visible, heartbreaking defeat. Then I looked up. I see. It's all so fast. The sooner we sign, the sooner we can all begin to heal. Sienna offered, her voice a balm of pure poison. I took a deep, shaky breath. You're right. Family is what's most important. I echoed her words from Sunday dinner. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a simple blue pen. I pulled the thick document toward me. Mom, wait, Logan said, half standing. Don't you want your own lawyer to look at this? Grant winced. Mr. Doyle's eyes narrowed. I gave my son the saddest, most broken smile I could conjure. Honey, what's the point? More lawyers, more fighting, more money. Your father, he needs this. He needs to move on. Sometimes. I looked directly at Grant. You just have to accept reality so everyone else can be happy. Grant couldn't hold my gaze. He looked down, but I saw his shoulders slump in a massive, unmistakable wave of relief. Sienna's smile was no longer faint. It was right there. I opened the document to the first yellow Sign Here tab. I didn't read a word. I just signed my name. Zara Barnes. I turned the page. Signed. Page after page. I signed away my house. I signed away my cabin. I signed away 20 years of my life. The only sound in the room was the scratching of my pen on the thick, expensive paper. When I reached the last page, I pushed the document back toward Mr. Doyle. Is that all I signed, all of them? I think, do I need to initial anything? Mr. Doyle, for the first time, looked momentarily speechless. He had probably budgeted an hour for fighting and tears. I had taken less than 5 minutes. No, Zara, that's everything, he said, recovering, stacking the pages. Good. I stood up, my chair scraping quietly on the floor. I put my pen back in my bag. I looked at the 4 of them, a tableau of my betrayal. Grant, the relieved coward, Doyle, the satisfied predator, Logan, the heartbroken fool, and Sienna, the triumphant usurper. Well, I said, my voice still that small, broken thing. I guess I'll start packing. I walked out of the room. I didn't run. I walked. I crossed the marble expanse, nodded at the receptionist, and entered the elevator. The doors closed, and I was alone. I watched the numbers descend. The moment the doors opened in the main lobby, I had my phone in my hand, dialing. I was out on the street, the cold air hitting my face. By the time she picked up, Alyssa, I said, my voice no longer trembling. It was as cold and hard as the steel building I had just left. It's Zara. The trap is set. Did they sign? They did, and so did I. They gave me a beige cardigan performance, and I gave it right back. They bought it all. I heard the smile in her voice. Good. My server is on his way to Doyle's office right now. They set a trap for me. Alyssa, I said, hailing a cab. But I think it's theirs. The night of the signing, Grant came home. He didn't come to the bedroom. I heard him in the guest room, drawers opening and closing. The next morning, he had 2 suitcases packed and waiting by the door. He found me in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee I didn't want. Zara, he said, and the false pity in his voice was nauseating. I've checked into the Brookridge Marriott, long-term, close to the office. I think it will be easier for you, give you space to, to pack, to grieve, to disappear. That's very considerate, Grant, I said, not looking up from my mug. Thank you. He hesitated, clearly expecting tears or a final, futile argument. My simple, quiet acceptance seemed to unnerve him more than a fight would have. Right. Well, I'll let you know when the lawyers say the financials are all cleared. Mr. Doyle said it should be straightforward. That's good, I said. Straightforward is good. He left. The click of the front door closing was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The house was finally, truly mine again, even if he didn't know it. The days that followed were a high-wire act. The tension was a living thing in the house, a second occupant that followed me from room to room. I had to be 2 people: the devastated, compliant ex-wife, and the cold, meticulous strategist. I went to work at the Brightline Community Project. I smiled. I coordinated a donor breakfast. I updated spreadsheets. I returned home. I watered the hydrangeas my mother had planted. I went to the grocery store. I even posted a picture on my private social media page, a shot of a new book and a glass of wine, with the caption, "Learning to embrace the quiet, new beginnings." I knew Sienna and Logan would see it. I needed them to see it. I needed them to report back to Grant that I was handling it all with a sad, pathetic grace. My only real contact with the truth was Harper. She had become a reluctant but thorough spy, driven by her own guilt and her clear, deep-seated fear of what her sister had become. A text would come in on the burner phone I'd bought. "His car is there. Logan left for the office an hour ago. He's been inside for 30 minutes. Grant, freed from our marriage, wasn't just staying at a hotel. He was commuting. He was going from his Marriott suite to my son's apartment, to Sienna." As soon as my son was safely at his desk, they weren't even waiting for my side of the bed to be cold. They were already playing house, just in a different location. Then, inevitably, Sienna called. Her name flashed on my phone, and I had to let it ring 3 times, take a deep breath, and compose my face before answering, putting the sad Zara voice on like a coat. "Hello, Sienna." "Zara, hi. I was just checking in on you," she said, her voice a bright, brittle chirp. "How are you holding up?" "Oh, one day at a time. It's a lot." "Doms." "Totally, I get it. Listen, I don't want to be a bother, but I was talking with Grant, and we're just so eager to get all this messiness settled. Have you thought about a moving company? I have a great recommendation. She was asking me to schedule my own eviction. I've made a few calls." I lied. "Great, because I was thinking, if it's okay with you, I'd love to swing by sometime this week. I just want to measure the kitchen for the new appliances. The ones I'm looking at have a 6-week lead time, and I want to get the order in." She wanted to measure, while I was still living there. The sheer, unadulterated gall of it almost made me laugh. "Oh," I said, injecting a note of flustered confusion. "Oh, Sienna, I don't know. The thing is, Mr. Doyle hasn't even sent the final confirmation. The court. It's not really finalized. It's just a signature. Zara. It's a formality. We all agreed." Her voice lost its chirp, replaced by a steel edge of impatience. I know. It's just, I'm a little superstitious. It feels wrong to have people moving in before the judge has signed the paper. You understand, don't you? It just feels like bad luck. I was the weak, sentimental fool. I heard her huff, a small, frustrated sound. "Fine, Zara, if that's how you want to be, just Let me know when it's final, okay? The sooner the better." She hung up. I put the phone down, my hand shaking, not with fear, but with a pure, white-hot rage. Meanwhile, Alyssa was building her case. I had forwarded her every text from Harper. She had hired a private investigator who, for a few $100s, had gotten the King's Rest Motel to confirm Grant Calloway's credit card had been used on the exact date and time Harper had specified. And I had acted on the bank information from my friend Sarah. The printout she'd slipped me in a coffee shop was damning. Grant, in the 2 weeks leading up to the signing, had made 3 large, unusual cash withdrawals, totaling over $50,000. He was emptying the joint accounts, hiding the liquid assets before the equitable division. Following Alyssa's precise, emailed instructions, I went to a different branch of my bank. I withdrew exactly half of the remaining balance from the joint accounts, my legal, undisputed share, and deposited it into the new, private account at a different bank, the one Grant didn't know existed. I left just enough in the old account to cover the mortgage and utilities, so no red flags would be raised. I was drawing down the treasury, leaving him in charge of an empty castle. Logan was the hardest part. He called me every night. "Mom, are you really okay? You sounded... I don't know. You just signed it. You didn't even fight." "Honey, what was there to fight for? Your father was miserable. He wanted to leave." "What? I was supposed to chain him to the radiator." "But the house. Mom, your house. It's just a house. Logan, it's just... stuff. You and I, we're fine. That's what matters." "I don't know. Mom, it doesn't feel right." My son, my good, decent son, knew something was wrong. His instincts were screaming, even if he couldn't name the monster. It broke my heart to lie to him, to hear the worry in his voice and not be able to soothe it with the truth, but the truth would shatter him. And as Alyssa said, the timing had to be perfect. His devastation had to land in a courtroom, not in my kitchen. "I'm fine, honey, just tired. Don't worry about me." The next day, I was finishing the last of the packing in the garage, sorting Grant's remaining boxes. A few had been shoved into a corner behind the lawnmower. As I dragged one out, a smaller document box, not even taped shut, slipped from the top and spilled its contents, mostly old tax returns, car maintenance records. But one thing caught my eye: a thin, glossy-covered policy statement. Northline Capital Group, his company's letterhead. It was a supplemental life insurance policy, the kind companies offer executives. Small, probably a $100,000 payout. I almost tossed it back, but I glanced at the details. Policyholder Grant Calloway. Policy date 3 months ago, and then primary beneficiary Sienna Rhodes. My blood went cold. Not cold. Like the ice, it evaporated. I was left with a hollow, ringing void in my chest. This was not a divorce. This was not a property grab. This was something else. This was darker. This was a woman who, 3 months ago, while sleeping with my husband, had him name her the beneficiary of his life insurance. It wasn't a crime, not yet, but it was a motive. It was a level of cold, reptilian planning that went far beyond kitchen renovations. They weren't just planning for a divorce. They were planning for after. I fumbled for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I took 3 pictures, the flash glaring off the paper. I sent them to Alyssa. My text was simple. "Found this in his garage files. I don't know what it means, but it feels bad." Her reply came back in less than a minute. "It means they're more stupid than I thought. Don't touch it. Don't mention it. I've got it." I put the paper back. I taped up the box, but I couldn't get the chill out of my hands. This was no longer a game about a house, and I was more determined than ever to make sure I was the only one left standing. It was a Thursday, just after 4 o'clock. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the quartz counters, a meaningless, repetitive task to keep my hands busy. The silence of the house was, as usual, deafening. Then I heard a car slamming on its brakes in my driveway. An engine cut. A door thrown open so hard it seemed to shudder. I didn't even have time to move to the window before my front door crashed open. Mom! It wasn't a call. It was a roar, a sound of pure, ragged agony. I ran to the foyer. Logan was standing there, his face a mask I didn't recognize. He was pale, almost gray, his eyes wide and bloodshot. His chest was heaving. He wasn't just upset. He was shattered. Logan, my God, what is it? What happened? He stumbled forward, not like my son, but like an old man, and grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. He couldn't form the words. He just shook his head, a single, violent tear cutting a path through the sweat on his face. He finally choked out. And him. My blood ran cold. He knew. Sit down, Logan. Sit down and tell me. I led him to the kitchen island, to the same heavy wooden chairs where Harper had sat what felt like a lifetime ago. He collapsed onto one, his body folding in on itself. Harper, he said, his voice cracking. She called me, crying. Hysterical. Said she couldn't live with it anymore. She told me to look. Look where, honey? My voice was calm, the ice forming, but this time it was to protect him. Her laptop, Sienna's laptop. He was breathing fast, reliving it. She told me to look in a folder, a hidden one. It was labeled Budget 2026. Just a stupid, boring name. I thought Harper was crazy. I opened it. He looked up at me, and his eyes were hollow. It wasn't a budget, Mom. It was chats, hundreds of them, between her and Dad. I held my breath. I said nothing. I let him speak. It wasn't just Dad. It was Grant. The things they said, the way they talked. They're lovers. He spat the word. They've been lovers for months. I know, I said. His head snapped up. What did you say? I know. Logan, I've known for weeks. But why didn't you? He was confused, the anger mixing with his pain. She called you. In the chat, she called you the old placeholder. The blood drained from my face. Hearing it confirmed by my son was 1,000 times worse than Harper's report. She called you the old placeholder, he repeated, his voice thick with disgust. And she was bragging to him that in 60 days, the house would be hers. They were laughing. Mom, about the paint, about the kitchen, about you. He finally broke. He put his head in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with sobs. I'm so stupid, he whispered, the sound muffled. I'm so stupid. No, you're not. Yes, I am, he yelled, slamming his fist on the wooden island. I believed her. I believed him. I sat at that table. Mom, I sat at that lawyer's office. And I felt sorry for them. I thought you were being weak. I thought you were just giving up. I was angry at you for not fighting. And all this time, you knew, and I was on their side. Oh, Logan, I said. The ice finally broke, not with rage, but with the pain for my child. I moved around the island and pulled him into my arms, holding his head against my chest as he cried. This grown man, my son, broken by the two people he should have been able to trust most in the world. I held him until the sobs subsided into shudders. I stepped back, holding his face, forcing him to look at me. You are not stupid. Logan, you are decent. You are a good man, and you do not know how to think like a viper. So you couldn't see them. That is not a weakness in you. It's a sickness in them. But, Mom, he's Dad, and she's my wife. She is his mistress, I said, the words sharp and cold. and he is a fool. But you signed the papers. I watched you. You gave them everything. A small, hard smile touched my lips. Did I, Logan? Sit down. You thought I was weak. You're about to find out what I've been doing. For the next 10 minutes, I told him everything. I started with Harper's first visit. I told him about the motel, and then I told him about the Callahan Heritage Trust. I told him about the bloodline covenant. I told him about the infidelity clause. I told him about Alyssa Mercer, my shark. I told him about the beige cardigan, and the performance at the lawyer's office, and the fraudulent document they tricked me into signing. I watched his face as I spoke. The devastation receded, replaced by a stunned, dawning disbelief. And then, for the first time in weeks, I saw a spark. It wasn't just relief. It was admiration. It was a cold, hard, Calloway family anger that he had inherited not from his father, but from me. So, the signing, it was a trap. It was their trap. Logan, I just let them spring it on themselves. They filed that document with the court, a document that gives Grant a house he has zero legal claim to, and in doing so, they provided my lawyer with a textbook case of fraud. He sat back, stunned. My God. Mom, I thought you were just rolling over. They thought so, too, I said. That was the entire point. They thought I was the old placeholder. They forgot I was the foundation. Just then, a car pulled into the driveway, this one slowly, cautiously. A moment later, Harper Rhodes was at the door. Her eyes were red and swollen, and when she saw Logan, she flinched, as if expecting him to yell at her. Logan, I'm so sorry, she stammered. It's okay. Harper, Logan said, his voice rough. You did the right thing. I couldn't let her do it to you, too, Harper whispered. Stepping inside, she was twisting her purse strap. She's not just with him. She's cruel. We know, I said. We know it all. No, Harper said, looking from me to Logan. You don't? In those chats, it wasn't just about the house. It was about you, Logan. Logan went very still. What about me? Harper visibly swallowed, forcing herself to say the words. She was complaining about you, to your father. She said you were sweet, but easy to fool. She said you were so predictable, and that managing you was exhausting but worth it, to get this. She gestured around the kitchen. She called you her golden goose, and your father, he laughed. That was it. That was the final, fatal blow. The betrayal by his father was one thing, the affair was one thing, but to know that they had sat together, the two of them, and mocked his love for her, that was an annihilation of his entire reality. Logan didn't rage. He didn't cry. I watched him solidify. The last of the heartbroken boy vanished, replaced by a cold, quiet man. Thank you, Harper, he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. You were right to tell me. We stood there, the three of us, the son, the wife, the sister-in-law. A broken, bizarre, and absolutely united front. We were a team of survivors. So what now? Logan asked, looking at me. We call them we. What? I looked at the counter, at the phone, at Sienna's last impatient message. No, we don't call. We do nothing. Mom. She wants the house, doesn't she? I said. She's impatient. She's measuring for appliances. She thinks I'm a sad old woman packing boxes. Let her think it. Let them finish their game. They've signed the papers. Now they're just waiting for the formality of the court. So let them come. Let them come and take it. Logan's eyes widened as he understood. You're going to let them move in. I'm going to let them try, I corrected. I want them here, on my property, with a truck full of their things, believing they have won. I want them to stand on that front lawn and demand I leave. That's when Alyssa files. That's when the trap springs. Not in an office, right here, in front of the prize. A long silence filled the room. Logan finally nodded. A slow, grim movement. Okay, I'm in. But I have one condition. What is it? When they come, he said, his voice a low, hard rumble. When she and him show up, demanding you get out. He stood up straight. I'm the one who opens the door. I'm the one who's going to be standing on the steps. I am not the sweet, easy boy anymore. I want them to see my face when they lose it all. We didn't have to wait long. It was a Saturday, just before noon. 10 days after the signing, the standard court processing period was almost up. I was in the living room, supposedly packing books, but really just watching the street. Logan was in the kitchen, silently drinking coffee, a coiled spring of tension. Then we heard it, the groan of a heavy engine, the hiss of air brakes, a large yellow moving truck, one of the national brands, lumbered to a stop at the end of my driveway, blocking the street. Behind it, Grant's sleek black sedan pulled up, parking right at the curb. They're here, Logan said, his voice a low growl. From the window, I watched the passenger door of the sedan open. Sienna emerged. She wasn't dressed for moving. She was wearing high-heeled boots, dark jeans, and an expensive-looking leather jacket. She looked, as the outline had predicted, like she was arriving to accept a castle. Grant got out of the driver's side, looking tired and anxious, but he followed her lead. Sienna strode onto the lawn, ignoring Grant, and marched directly to the cab of the moving truck. She barked something at the driver, who was leaning out the window. Then she turned to the two movers who had gotten out of the back. Okay, she yelled, her voice sharp and carrying across the lawn. All the boxes marked kitchen and master come in through the front door first. The rest can go to the garage for now. This is our house. Let's go. This was it. Logan looked at me, his eyes hard. He nodded. As the movers started to unlatch the back of the truck, Logan walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out onto the porch, blocking the entrance. He stood there, arms crossed, a solid, unmoving wall. Sienna, busy directing, didn't notice him for a moment. Then she saw him, her face, which had been bright with triumph, darkened. Logan, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be helping your mom pack. This is my mother's house, Logan said, his voice booming in the quiet morning air, loud enough for the movers, the neighbors, everyone, to hear. You are not bringing one box in here. You are not taking one step on this porch. You are not welcome here. Sienna froze. The movers stopped, looking from Logan to her. This was not in their work order. What? Sienna's voice was a disbelieving shriek. What are you talking about? It's done. We signed Logan. Tell your mother to come out here and stop playing games. She's not playing, Logan said. She's not the one who was... We signed the papers, you idiot, Sienna screamed, her mask of sophistication completely disintegrating. She was dropping her polished CN persona and revealing the raw, vicious woman beneath. In your father's lawyer's office, it's done. The house is ours. Now get out of the way before I call the police. Go ahead, Logan said. Call them? She's just a bitter old hag, Sienna shrieked, tears of rage now appearing in her eyes. She's mad she lost. She's trying to get back at your father. She signed. She gave us the house. Actually, a new voice said, I didn't. I stepped out of the front door, closing it softly behind me. I stood next to my son. I was wearing my beige cardigan. In my hand, I held a single, thick manila file, the one Alyssa had prepared for me this very morning, just in case. Grant, who had been lingering by the car, finally seemed to register the scene. He started walking toward the porch, his face a mask of confusion. Zara Logan, what is this? This is all settled. Sienna pointed a shaking finger at me. You tell your son to move. I looked past her, at Grant. Then I looked at her. I opened the file. You're right, Sienna, I said. my voice perfectly calm, perfectly clear. We did sign a document, an agreement I was fraudulently coerced into signing, an agreement that my attorney, Alyssa Mercer, is filing a motion to void as we speak. What? Grant stopped dead on the walkway. Mr. Doyle's reptilian face flashed in my mind. You see, there's the little matter of the Callahan Heritage Trust, I continued, projecting my voice. The trust that owns this house and the land it sits on. The one my mother founded. Sienna's face went from rage to confusion. What trust the house is? Grant said the house was... And in that trust, I said, pulling out the top sheet, there is a covenant. A bloodline covenant. It states that this property cannot be transferred, conveyed, or assigned to any person not of my direct bloodline. That means you, Grant, were always a guest. And you. I looked directly at Sienna. We're never, ever going to be an owner. Sienna looked at Grant, her eyes wild. He said it was a legal nightmare. He said, but that's not the best part, I said, a cold smile on my lips. There's also a codicil. For infidelity. Grant went pale. The color drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. He knew. He finally understood. He looked at me, and I saw it the sick, dawning realization that I had known all along. A codicil, I repeated. That states that in the event of a marital dissolution caused by proven adultery, the spouse who committed the adultery forfeits all claims to any and all assets tied to the trust. That includes this house. It includes the cabin at Silverwell. I looked at Sienna. It was quite specific. Especially adultery with, say, a family member, like a daughter-in-law. Sienna was no longer a person. She was a sound, a high-pitched, animal wail of fury. You bitch! You knew you sat there, in that office, and you, Harper. It was Harper, that snake. She told you I'll kill her. I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you. The movers were already backing away, getting into the cab of their truck. This was over. Sienna, Grant said, his voice a hoarse whisper. Sienna, shut up. No, I won't. This was our plan. And that was all my son needed to hear. Logan stepped off the porch, walking slowly down the steps until he was face to face with his father. He was a head taller than Grant. He was all the youth and strength Grant had squandered. You didn't just betray Mom, Logan said, his voice low, shaking with a contained, terrifying rage. You betrayed me. You sat at my table. You drank my wine. And you laughed at me with my wife. My wife. He said the word like it was poison. Logan? Grant reached out a hand. Don't touch me. Logan's voice was flat. Get off her property. Get off my mother's property. Right now. And don't ever come back. Grant stumbled back, as if he'd been hit. He looked at me. One last, pleading, desperate look. I just stared back at him, my face a mask of cold porcelain. I had one last thing to add. By the way, Grant, I called out, as he and Sienna stood, exposed and defeated on the lawn. The utilities are all back in my name. The insurance, the taxes, I had them transferred yesterday. You officially have no valid address here. You might want to call the Marriott. Tell them you'll need to extend your stay. The scene on the lawn was the climax of the battle, but the war was finished in the days that followed, with the cold, quiet precision of legal filings and police reports. The first call came from Alyssa, less than an hour after the moving truck had performed a humiliated three-point turn and rumbled away. It's done, Zara, she said, her voice crisp. The court has accepted our counter-motion. The judge reviewed the trust covenants and the preliminary evidence of adultery and fraud. Grant's entire filing is voided. He has been officially, and may I say beautifully, served. Mr. Doyle is likely having a very, very bad Saturday. He's not the only one, I said, watching Grant's sedan peel out from the curb. Sienna's furious gesture visible even from a distance. The house is secure, Alyssa continued. The cabin is secure. Now, we go for the rest. We have a hearing scheduled for the final division of assets, but given his behavior, we'll be arguing for a highly punitive split. You played your part perfectly. I thanked her, but a new, darker thread was already pulling at me. The victory felt incomplete. The image of that life insurance policy in the garage, Sienna's name, beneficiary had changed the stakes. The second call, 2 days later, confirmed I was right. It was Harper. She sounded breathless, terrified. Zara, I did something, she said, her voice a whisper. After Logan, after he saw the laptop, I kept it. I told Sienna I'd given it back to him, but I lied. I've been looking. Harper, you need to be careful. I know, but I found something else. Not in the chats, in her documents, a PDF she saved. It was a how-to guide. Zara. Optimizing survivor benefits and life insurance payouts. It was ghoulish. My blood ran cold. But that's not the bad part. Harper stammered, clearly crying. I found a form, a life insurance application, not Grant's, yours, mine. Yes, a policy on your life, for $500,000, the beneficiary, Sienna Rhodes, listed as business partner, caretaker, and Zara, the signature, she. She signed your name. I found it in a folder dated 2 months ago, right after the one she took out on Grant. I hung up and immediately called Alyssa. I told her what Harper had found. There was a long, dead silence on the other end of the line. Alyssa, are you there? This, Alyssa finally said, her voice an octave lower, has just stopped being a divorce. This is a criminal investigation. The next day, I was not at a lawyer's office. I was at the Brook Ridge Police Department, in a small, sterile room, handing copies of everything to a detective, the policy I'd found in the garage, a printout of the application Harper had just discovered, the text messages, the history. I was no longer the easy-to-manage wife. I was a potential victim. The detective, a woman with tired, intelligent eyes, listened to the entire story. She looked at the signature on the application, then at the one on my driver's license. This is not a match, she said, a flat statement of fact. And given the other circumstances, the affair, the fraudulent divorce filing, the trespass, this is a very clear pattern of predatory behavior. We'll get a warrant for the original document from the insurance company's underwriting department. We can pull your bank's signature card. Forgery is a felony. Mrs. Barnes, the investigation, once opened, moved with astonishing speed. The detective confirmed the signature was a forgery. The life insurance company confirmed the policy was active, but now flagged. The moment criminal charges were mentioned, Grant's entire world collapsed. He was, at his core, a coward. Faced with a civil suit from me, he was arrogant. Faced with criminal charges as an accessory to fraud, and possibly worse, he crumbled. He hired a new lawyer, a criminal defense attorney, and he began to sing. He admitted to the affair. Of course, he admitted to the plan to take the house, painting it as Sienna's idea, that he was foolishly talked into. But his lawyer had clearly drawn the line at the insurance. Grant swore, on paper, that Sienna had suggested mirror policies for security and that he had agreed, but he had no knowledge she had forged my signature. He thought I had signed it myself. He was, in his version, just as shocked as I was. He was painting himself as her second victim. He was throwing her to the wolves to save himself. Sienna, apparently, found out. My phone rang late one night from a blocked number. I answered, and her voice, no longer polished, but a low, guttural snarl, came through the line. You think you're so smart. You old bitch. I said nothing. You ruined everything. With your secret, your little family trust. I'm going to the press. Zara, I'm going to tell every reporter in this city how you and your rich family used a legal trick to throw your husband out. Is that a threat, Sienna? I asked, my voice calm. It's a promise you'll be a pariah. Go ahead, I said. My trust is legal. My house is mine. My signature, however, yours is a forgery. You should be calling a bail bondsman. Sienna, not a reporter. I hung up. The final act was a quiet one. Logan came over that weekend with his truck. He didn't ask. He just went to the garage, loaded the last of Grant's boxes, the ones I had packed, the ones he had left behind, and drove away. He didn't say where he was taking them. I suspected the local dump. It was a funeral. He was burying his father, at my request, with the trespassing incident and Sienna's late-night, threatening call as evidence. The court granted an emergency restraining order. Sienna Rhodes was legally barred from coming within 100 yards of me, my son, or my home. They were, in the most literal sense, finished. Grant had been fired from Northline Capital, his accounts frozen pending the multiple investigations. He had no house, no job. Sienna, named in a criminal forgery investigation and a civil fraud suit, had no assets of her own. The Marriott had long since become too expensive. They were, as far as I could tell, living in a long-term stay motel off the highway, not far from the King's Rest, where this all began. They were, in a word, homeless. The final hearing was not a trial. It was a formality, a surgical extraction. We were in a smaller, more private family court chamber, not the grand conference room of Mr. Doyle's firm. Alyssa sat beside me, her files stacked in a neat, lethal pile. Logan was in the row behind me, a silent, solid presence. Harper, having given her deposition, sat with him. Across the aisle sat Grant, his new criminal lawyer at his side. And 2 chairs down, Sienna, alone, her face a pale, tight mask of pure venom. Her clothes were wrinkled. She looked like she hadn't slept. Mr. Doyle, notably, was absent, having been summarily dismissed by Grant and now facing a potential bar complaint filed by Alyssa, the judge, a sharp woman in her 60s with zero tolerance in her eyes, read from the file. In the matter of Barnes versus Calloway, she began, her voice cutting through the silent room. This court has reviewed the initial filing by Mr. Calloway's former counsel and the subsequent counter-motion by Mrs. Barnes. To call Mr. Calloway's filing one-sided would be a gross understatement. It appears to be a textbook case of procurement by fraud, designed to strip Mrs. Barnes of assets that were never, at any point, marital property. She peered over her glasses at Grant. Mr. Calloway, did you ever, at any point, read the Callahan Heritage Trust documents you signed at the closing of your home? Grant, who had been staring at his hands, looked up, lost. I don't recall. It was 20 years ago. I'm sure, the judge said, her voice dry. Well, I've read them, and they are ironclad. This court recognizes the full and indisputable sovereignty of the trust. The Brookridge residence and the Silverwell Lake cabin are, and always have been, the sole and separate property of Zara Barnes. She turned a page. Furthermore, this court recognizes the infidelity clause. Given the overwhelming and, frankly, distasteful evidence of adultery, not just adultery, but adultery with the wife of the couple's only son, this court finds Mr. Calloway's behavior to be of a particularly egregious and morally corrupt nature. Therefore, in the division of remaining actual marital assets, this court awards 75% of all joint holdings, liquid and investment, to Mrs. Barnes. A strangled sound, a hissing gasp, came from Sienna. Mr. Calloway will retain 25%, the judge concluded, and is ordered to pay all of Mrs. Barnes's legal fees. This petition is granted. The divorce is final. She banged the gavel. It was over. But as Alyssa began to gather her papers, a man in a suit who had been standing at the back of the courtroom stepped forward and spoke to the bailiff, who in turn spoke to the judge. The judge looked up, her expression hardening. It appears we have one more piece of business. Detective Miller, you may approach. Sienna's head snapped up. I watched Grant's blood pressure visibly rise, a panic pulsing in his temple. The detective I had met, the one with the tired, intelligent eyes, stepped forward, holding a file. Your Honor, thank you. We are not here regarding the civil matter, but a separate criminal investigation, pursuant to our findings. The Brookridge District Attorney's Office is formally charging Ms. Sienna Rhodes with 3 counts: felony identity theft, insurance fraud, and forgery. Sienna shot to her feet. What? This is insane. He did it. She pointed a shaking finger at Grant. He told me to. It was his idea. He wanted to get rid of her. Grant, for the first time, looked truly, completely broken. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. That's not true, he whispered. Not to the judge, not to Sienna, but to himself. Mr. Calloway has been cooperating with our investigation as a material witness, the detective said calmly. We have his sworn testimony. The forgery, Ms. Rhodes, was in your handwriting. The application was filed from your laptop, from your IP address. This is on you. Sienna's face crumpled. The rage, the arrogance, all of it collapsed into a raw, ugly, cornered animal panic. You bastard! She screamed at Grant. You promised we'd have it all. You're leaving me. You're going to let them do this to me. Grant just put his bowed head in his hands. He had lost his wife. He had lost his son. He had lost his house. He had lost his firm. And now, he had lost his honor, turning on the very person he had sacrificed everything for. He had nothing left. I stood up. The room was silent. All eyes on me. I looked at Grant, the shell of the man I had spent half my life with, and I looked at Sienna, the woman who had tried to erase me. I said the only thing left to say. You thought I didn't read the things I signed. My voice was not loud, but it filled the room. Your biggest mistake, the biggest mistake both of you made, was thinking I was stupid. I turned and walked toward the door. Alyssa caught up to me, a small, satisfied smile on her face. The judge is also signing the permanent restraining order, 100 yards, for both of them, from you and from Logan. Thank you, Alyssa, I said. For everything. It was, she said. My absolute pleasure. I walked out of the courtroom, into the wide, sterile hallway. Logan and Harper were waiting. Logan's face was grim, but he held out his arm for me, and I took it. Harper stood beside him, her expression one of profound, exhausted relief. We didn't cheer, we didn't celebrate. This was not a victory, it was a survival. It was an amputation that had, thank God, been successful. We walked, the 3 of us, a new, strange, broken family, to the elevators, and rode down in silence. We had ended the war, and now the quiet felt strange. As we stepped out into the bright, cold air of the parking garage, we heard her. I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you. I'll tell everyone you won't get away with this. It was Sienna, being led out a side door in handcuffs by 2 officers. Her face was a mess of tears and rage. A plainclothes officer walking with her, probably Detective Miller, said, Ms. Rhodes, I strongly advise you to remain silent. You are in an active criminal investigation. We didn't stop. We just kept walking. Then I saw Grant. He was walking out of the main entrance, alone, carrying a briefcase. He saw Sienna, saw the handcuffs. He just stopped. He was a man with no one to follow, no one to lead, and nowhere to go. He had to follow her, his co-conspirator, his, whatever she was. He had to find a new lawyer, figure out bail. He, who had once commanded a boardroom, was now just a disgraced man in a parking lot, figuring out where he and his mistress were going to sleep. The perfect punishment. We got in the car, Logan driving. The ride home was silent. When we pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly the same. The hydrangeas were fine. The paint was fine. The door was solid. Logan walked me to the porch. Are you okay, Mom? He asked, his voice low. I am, I said. and I was surprised to find I meant it. Are you? He nodded, the hardness in his face finally softening, replaced by a deep, profound sadness. I will be. Eventually. He looked at the house. You were always the foundation. Mom, I'm so sorry I didn't see it. You see it now, I said, and squeezed his hand. He left. I went inside. I walked into the kitchen. My kitchen. I put my purse on the heavy butcher block island. The house was quiet. It was just my house. And for the first time in a month, I cried. I cried not because I had lost my husband. I cried because I hadn't lost my son. I cried because I hadn't lost my home. I cried because my plan, my desperate, terrifying, ice-in-the-veins plan, had worked. I had survived. I was not easy to manage. I was not the old placeholder. I was the keeper of the house, and the house was safe. The cheaters were, truly, homeless. Their downfall was complete, and I didn't need to see another second of it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you want to support us, hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.